I think Disney needs to come to the realization that their modernized movie formulas are not working out for them. Sure, they've seen some successes over the past couple of years, but they've seen even more failures. And now we're finding out that Snow White's opening box office has tanked with a 43 million weekend, officially the lowest opening Disney live action remake of all time. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, I have to say this all the time, and I will continue to. I want these movies to be successful. I grew up watching the Disney princesses. I grew up watching the MCU. I grew up watching Star Wars. I do not want Disney to constantly take beloved franchises and characters and storylines and mess them up. I want them to put as much money and time and effort as possible into these, and I want them to do justice, but they just haven't really been doing that over the years. Sure, they have seen some success. I'm not saying that Disney is completely failing as a company and they're going under, but they've also seen a lot of failures, and the modern movie formula they're going with is not turning out to be that successful for them. There have been very few MCU projects that have been successful after Infinity War and Endgame, after what I would call the end of the MCU. They have had only a few of these successful live action adaptations, like Maleficent. The first one did pretty good. They had Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. And then with the TV shows that they've done for Disney Plus, most of those have been failures. And now we're finding out that Snow White, a movie that has been steeped in controversy, also is not bringing them in all of the money they probably expected, because the numbers are out and Disney's latest live action gamble has officially face planted. The Snow White opening weekend box office stands at a meager 43 million domestically and 87.3 million globally, and not even Variety or the Hollywood Reporter can spin it into a win anymore. You might be thinking to yourself, $87 million globally, that's a chunk of change, but they cannot hold on to that number for the next 3 weeks or 4 weeks. So it's going to significantly drop. Typically, with the live actions, we see about a 50% drop weekend over weekend. So next weekend, they might make 45 globally, and that's definitely not going to get them to the money that they need, because we know that it is a disaster, especially when the film carries a 250 million plus production budget, not counting its hefty marketing spend. So let's say they put 100 million into marketing, and we'll call it 350 million. I think that the only number that they were really shooting for is $1 billion. And I'm sure that that's been their goal for most of these live action adaptations, though I do not see that happening at this point in time with the amount of money that they've brought in. It says Variety still tried to hold the line weekly, proclaiming Snow White as the fairest of them all at the box office, but the article noticeably lacked the usual bravado. Instead, the numbers spoke louder than the PR spin. This is the lowest opening ever for one of their live action remakes. Yes, even lower than the infamous flop Dumbo, which debuted at 45 million without adjusting for inflation, and it also is the lowest of the live action adaptations for user scores for the Disney princess movies. I mean, yes, you do have Mulan, which didn't open in theaters because it released in 2020 and it was direct to Disney Plus during the pandemic, but the all critic was a 71% and the all audience was a 46%. And then you have Snow White at an all critic 44 and an all audience 23. That is terrible. And then, of course, you can't even start to compare these numbers to things like Beauty and the Beast or Aladdin, which had like 90s and 95s. Even if you bring The Little Mermaid into the fray, that has better numbers, and this was also another controversial launch. The all critic was a 67%, and the all audience was a 57%. So Snow White is definitely not the fairest of them all in terms of box office numbers or scores or really anything. I just don't see how you could call this a success in any way, shape, or form at this point. Even The Hollywood Reporter, usually a safe haven for Disney friendly coverage, couldn't ignore how damning this result is. Their article bluntly admits Snow White opened behind expectations, calling the performance trouble and confirming it lagged behind even Dumbo's dismal start. No amount of glossy headlines could hide that. It is insane that we are talking about Snow White, a flagship princess for Disney, doing worse than Dumbo. Now, I don't think that it's just Rachel Zegler's fault, but I do think that she did not help this movie in any way. Yes, she went into interviews and she was talking about how the prince was a stalker and he was creepy and the original was outdated. But even putting that to the side, this was a total reimagining. There were 6 new songs. They got rid of iconic songs. They did not tell the same story. They modernized it in every way, shape, or form. Like, Snow White is a strong woman who wants to be a leader. You have so many problems just with the storytelling itself. It didn't really represent Snow White at all, which I think turned a lot of people off, especially parents who initially probably wanted to bring their children because they grew up watching it and then they were like, there's no way I'm going to do this. For context, let's not forget the much maligned Marvel film The Marvels, which debuted with a 46 million domestic weekend and 110 million worldwide, which even that was terrible for them. But that still brought in more. The movie was declared dead on arrival, triggering endless analysis pieces about franchise fatigue and Disney's mounting creative issues. Now Snow White has opened worse, and the media is running out of excuses, which certainly is not surprising. Over the years, Disney has been heavily criticized for basically every move that they've made, and I think that they need to rehire people who are fans. They need to stop hiring activists, stop hiring individuals that push, Bob Iger's political viewpoint, and they just need to go back to hiring the best person for the job, and they need to shove off with the DEI quotas. They need to be hiring talented people, and then maybe they can actually start to see success with all of these movies and these franchises. They need to stop with the Force is feminist for Star Wars. They need to stop modernizing and putting feminist leads in the Disney princess movies. They need to stop with the Captain Marvels and the Ms. Marvels, and they need to focus on the characters people like in the MCU, and then maybe they can make money again, but I just don't see them doing that anytime soon. They are certainly a company that has doubled, tripled, and quadrupled down on wokeness, and it is sad to see because I do love a lot of characters they have. I've loved a lot of storylines that they've put out in the past, but this is abysmal for them. A 43 million opening weekend domestically, and even worldwide, it did worse than the Marvels. That's pretty disastrous for Disney. So I'll be keeping my eye on this to see if any other media outlets try to spin this into a success story, though I just don't see how that could happen at this point. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.